My name is Jalen Adams. I'm a senior at Olympic High School.
My name is India Williams, and I attend East Mecklenburg High School.
My name is Jayla Soares, and I attend the West Charlotte High School.
My name is Jamari Joyner. I'm a sophomore, and I go to Harding University High School.
My name is Darius Lassane, and I'm a junior at Harding University High School.
My name is Justin Castro. I'm in the 11th grade, and I attend Harding University High School.
Hello, my name is Miliani Smith, and I attend Charlotte Country Day School.
My name is Larry Bosc, and I'm a retired teacher. Taught for 41 years, most of it at East Mecklenburg High School. I was very excited to be asked to participate in this student discussion. History has always been a passion of mine ever since I was in high school, a very long time ago. And I'm very excited to be at the Levine.
My name is Hannah Hassan. I am a poet, a storyteller, a playwright, and a speaker. I am also on the Levine Museum for the New South's Community Advisory Committee. I am excited to be here today because much of the work that I do in the world is centered around gathering stories so that we can preserve our history. So I'm really excited to talk to our students about history and about the future that they envision for our world and for their schools. I'm very excited to be here today. All right, y'all, so we're wrapping up a conversation about what is missing in some of our history classes or y'all's history classes and in your curriculum. Justin, I think that you had a point that you want to make that would sort of put a bow on the what when we talk about what's missing. What was that?
Yeah, I do like when we focus on specific stuff or specific stories, if that makes sense. Or just topics in general, even if it's not for long, if we could just hit it and make sure everybody gets it, I personally enjoy that. You know, like, or certain questions like, how were different ethnic groups, like Latinos or Asians, affected during segregation? You know, what was their struggle like? What was going on with them? Or also, even locally, like in Charlotte, like when did the Latino population start going up in Charlotte? Because, you know, now it's a lot of us. It's a lot of us, but, you know, I've always grown up seeing my people here, but I know that's not always been the case. And, you know, it's just certain things that I personally I ask a lot of questions. Yeah. So, yeah, I just think it's important to sometimes touch really hard on really specific things. Yeah, that makes sense. So we've hit why some local stories are not covered, why we're not talking about specific ethnic groups and communities inside of different stories. There's a lot that you all have reflected that you feel like is missing. So I think that it's a natural space now to talk about why some of that's not there. And Larry, we're going to pull you right on in as we begin that conversation. Maybe you can provide some perspective with why some of these things are missing from the curriculum as a teacher.
Well, I certainly mentioned earlier that some of those things are missing because they're not in the curriculum. And if they're not in the curriculum and you're a teacher, you have to teach the curriculum, particularly if there's a standardized test like the AP test, the IB test, or when they used to have end-of-course tests in history, which they got rid of the last 2 years. Don't know whether they're coming back, but they could come back. And again, teachers have no control over that. So that's certainly one thing. I still think that teachers, I think teacher training is, in terms of the biggest miss, in my opinion, in all the years that I was teaching, was that our workshops out of school focused too much on pedagogy and not enough on content. And to me, that's the reason I got involved in the Charlotte Teachers Institute, which had seminars, of content-based seminars, and other places too. So it's sad that we don't provide the kind of content-based training that would make a history teacher a better teacher, because there could be a focus on a particular topic. For example, one of the most amazing workshops I attended was a long time ago at the North Carolina Center for the Advancement of Teaching, and it was called Women in the Civil Rights Movement. And it was eye-opening for me. But I was able to use that information in my own classroom. But if that's not offered to teachers, and many teachers don't have the time to take a seminar outside of school because they might have multiple jobs, so that means that the stories, particularly the powerful stories, are just not told.
Do you have any instances of, like, have you seen any teachers that try to fight for certain subjects or to be able to teach certain things or touch on certain subjects? Because personally, I haven't had any teacher that really necessarily speaks out about things that they want to know, because, like, they've expressed to us that they want to know, that they want to learn or teach more about about a certain subject, but they never really, I don't think they really say anything to administration about it.
Yeah.
Which could
well,
also
again, I've mentioned that it's not the same every school. At some schools, your teachers are supported well by administrative staff, and at some they're not. So that's one problem with it. Sometimes there's just a difficulty in providing the expertise that's necessary. I started an African American Studies class at East Meck in the mid-90s, and when I went to the principal to say I'd like to do this, he said yes, but didn't offer me anything. Like, I couldn't get any training, I couldn't go to any seminars, so I had to do it myself. And I was lucky to have already had a few seminars before that. But that's an example. If you're a teacher and you've got a family, as I did at the time, I'm retired now, my children are gone, but it was hard. And I struggled at first because it was all about me, and I fortunately had some really good friends who were able to show me some things. So, that can be a real problem. You want to do something, but you either don't have the time or you don't have content-based training, etc.
All right, so adding on to that, so when you're going into training to become a history teacher, do they put, like, all of the histories onto that one training, or you learn about the certain history you want to teach in that one training?
Well, first of all, there are two things to become a teacher. You have to have a bachelor's degree, and if you want to, it doesn't have to be a bachelor's degree in history to teach history. It can be a bachelor's degree in any social science, right? So it could be politics, political science, it could be anything. But then, of course, you have to get certified, and that certification is mostly education classes, and which I think are some of them were valuable for me, and some of them were completely useless. And again, that focus was too much on pedagogy, how to teach, rather than what to teach, and how, what kind of information. So that's another challenge for teachers, to have them be prepared to teach a particular history.
Someone had brought up a point about the relationship between the students and the teachers. So I guess just my question to you is, how have you been able to address uncomfortable situations with students, or if a student has been uncomfortable and they've come up to you, how have you addressed that in the past?
Well, I've always, been lucky enough to have an agreement with most of my students beforehand that we could discuss freely issues that maybe they wouldn't be discussing in other classes. And I held them accountable for I mean, they couldn't just express their opinion, they had to defend their opinion. I retired, and then a couple of years later, I I volunteered to do some substituting for one of the teachers who took over my IB classes at East, Mrs. Thompson. Excuse me, not Thompson, Bauer, sorry, Bauer. And I was in the classroom, and she wanted me to do a unit on the civil rights movement. So I said we need to start before what most people consider to be the beginning of the movement, Brown versus Board of Education in 1955. So I wanted to talk about the pre-Brown stuff in the beginning, and I had them read a short story called The Homecoming by Frank Yerby. And I thought that it was valuable because it talks about an African-American veteran coming home to a small southern town and being treated as you would expect in 1946 an African-American who served his country to be treated, which is not well. However, in the short story written by an African-American writer, the N-word is used. And I wanted to have them read aloud the scene next to the very beginning of the short story, where students are surrounding the Confederate monument, which exists in every southern town, and the ridiculous Jim Crow rules of social engagement between blacks and whites. You know, not looking them in the face, etc. And this, of course, this man who had just served his country, who had been wounded and was limping, was treated badly. And the N-word was used. And so, you know, I prefaced that by saying, when you read this, that's what you're going to read. And that's the way it was. But that I think I taught another class, and then somebody came to me. And fortunately, I was subbing, and you know, I was doing a favor, but they were able to deal with this backlash, and it was mostly parental backlash. The students, as far as I knew, were okay with it. But that's something that, you know, if you're going to deal with topics like that, you have to be very sensitive to those things. And you know, there's many times when that's happened, and I don't want to talk anymore about all the other times, but it's a problem for teachers, particularly in this day and age.
What would you all see as we're talking about the why, the impact, maybe emotionally, that it has on you to know that there's something that's missing, and you might not get it, or you might have to go get it yourself or research at home? How does it make you feel?
I feel like whatever is missing could be a big thing that influences our opinions on whatever happened. Like also with local history, with local history missing from us, it's just like it's taken away from where we live. It's like we live in this area, but we don't know much about it. But we don't know what was there before, what came from that, like how everything came to be.
Yeah. What else?
It's frustrating.
Say more.
Like you said, our local history is fundamental to like our existence and our being as being Charlotteans and coming from here. Like, well, I wasn't raised here. I was raised in Winsboro, South Carolina. But I don't know much about it, and that's a personal thing. But at the same time, it's like I don't feel, it's more of a sense of identity for me. And if I don't know where I'm from, like outside of, we were in communities and schools, and we actually read a book about like the history of West Charlotte and the community surrounding West Charlotte, and it was very enlightening, and I felt like I really did not know where I was, but like in a sense of just where I came from, like the people before me. Like you said that it was the sugary people. I never knew that. And I felt like, oh my gosh, there's something I don't know, which of course there's a lot of things that I don't know, but it's very frustrating to know that there's some things I'm not going to know, but my school could have taught it to me.
When you, so we started out with the land acknowledgement. of the Catawba and the Sugaree people, and just in mentioning that, we drive down, many of us, Sugar Creek, right? And there are these like roads and streets that have names that are attached to them that meant something to someone, right? That's our roots, you know? We live here and exist here in this space, and understanding our roots, at least for me, is so important for understanding who I am in that space, right?
I kind of feel disrespected by it a little bit, because a lot of the history that isn't being taught is my own history. Of course, there's always, I think it was Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools versus Swan, which was the issue with public busing and making sure we could desegregate Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools and the surrounding communities. There's also my godmother who works at the library gave me a book, I think it's called Tomorrow's Bread, and it completely focuses on the reshaping of a neighborhood in Charlotte where they dismantled an entirely black neighborhood in order to build, of course, the downtown street we walk in. So I always feel a little disrespected by it because it is my history. Those were my ancestors. Some of my family has been here for a while, and so I hear about these things that were so monumental to them that mean so little to me, and I'm like, I should have been taught that. You should have taught me this. This should be important to me, and it isn't. And so I always feel disrespected, a little upset, and kind of a little angry about it, just because it kind of shows who you're prioritizing. Because if you're prioritizing the people or the comfort and guilt of the people who tore down the neighborhoods, you're making me feel like I'm not a priority when it was my neighborhood that being torn down. And when you do that, it speaks a lot to not only the culture of our society, but also kind of the culture of how we learn history and how we teach it. So
yeah, I was just gonna say that I personally feel tired because I feel oftentimes, kind of going off on what you were saying, Justin, like, okay, so I would say, like, I definitely took more initiative, like, after the events of, like, 2020, everything that happened in the summer, and I was in a very mode of, like, teach myself, like, you know what, I'm gonna find my own resources, I'm gonna do, you know, what empowers me, like, I don't know, that was just a really, like, transformational time for me, and I'm sure for, like, a lot of other people as well. But then I just remember, like, coming back to school, and I became the president of my school's Black Student Union, and it was in like, okay, so now that, like, I'm advocating for all these different areas, it's like people are coming to me, asking me questions, and it kind of like puts this responsibility of like, oh, okay, so I've taught myself, now I'm supposed to teach you. And my school has these lunch forums, they're called DAF, for Diversity Awareness Forums, and we have presentations, and students are required to go to like 2 or 3 a year to fulfill like their graduation requirements. And there, like, we have to like do presentations like of your choosing. So like me as a club leader, the other people on the exec board, like, we come up with a topic, we make a whole presentation, and then like for the lunch period, we're pretty much like teaching, you know, giving our perspective of whatever like topic that we chose, of whether it's like Black culture, culture appropriation. But then oftentimes it's like, okay, wow, I just sat here for an hour teaching y'all something that you could have taught yourself, and just like as like a club leader or community leader, like, it gets tiring at some point in time when it's like, okay, I'm not only having to teach myself, I'm having to teach you because you won't take the initiative to teach yourself. And I just definitely think that there's a balance, and that's why I guess like coming back around to like the whole school curriculum, why I think schools need to do a better job as well as far as like incorporating current events that are going on, so then people can become interested and they can do their own research and teach themselves. But yeah.
I have a lot to say about this.
Come on.
Honestly, I feel very intellectually neglected. Thank you. But, you know, knowledge, as Justin was saying earlier, you're your own person. You have to go out and figure out your own path and what you want to know. You have to go research, you know, certain topics. But at some point, knowledge belongs to everyone. Who can determine what I should be able to know? You know, that's something that the school, not only the school board, but like curriculum has put certain restraints on what we can know, because how are we supposed to question stuff that we didn't know exists? So it definitely makes me frustrated a lot of the time, neglected, anger, like everyone else is saying, and extremely disappointed.
That's a word. I think that what's interesting is I'm hearing you all sort of share your feelings about where you are now and how this impacts you every day. And it just makes me think that, so the school system, it's a system essentially. And as you graduate out, you essentially graduate into other systems. And the way that this is sort of created, where there are some of these stories that are your own, that are not being taught, that are not being centered, it happens again. When you go to college, possibly depending on the school that you attend, it definitely happens for someone like me. I've seen it in workplaces where there seems to be some type of concerted effort to make sure that certain identities and experiences are centered while others are not, and then the onus is placed upon me as the black person, the woman of color in the room, to say, but wait. And I remember doing that in elementary school, in middle school, in high school, and at some point it does become tiring. It can become a bit exhausting continuously having to say, but we're not telling this story, we're not documenting this history, and having to be the one to say it because you're being excluded. So oftentimes that can take a toll. It just can.
I think at the end of the day, I've always been taught by a lot of people, Miss Sutton, Miss Hassan, my mom, Mr. Metz, everybody, is you have to be your own representation at the end of the day, because who's going to do it if you don't?
Yeah.
And I think me being in that mentality, it doesn't get as tiring and exhausting, because I know, okay, if I don't do it, ain't nobody else going to speak up for me. That's on me. And like, if I don't tell somebody I feel uncomfortable, if I don't tell somebody, like you said, hey, there's a part that you're missing here, then like I said, nobody else is going to do it. So if you be your own representation, then those perspectives are going to come in, and those perspectives are going to be shown. And then that speaks for other people and to other people that, hey, okay, maybe it's my turn. And for those future generations, like you said, we're going into other systems. I'm a senior. I'm moving on to college. But for the people under me, they have to not fill my shoes, but kind of fill where I was, to be their own representation and to tell people, hey, this is not right, or I love that you're doing this, keep doing this. Yeah. So if you represent yourself now and make a good image for yourself and advocate what you love, what you don't like, what you just, your being, then your perspectives and perceptions are going to be there.
I think that that might be a good place to pause for a moment. We're talking about sort of what is missing in the history curriculum and why it's missing. And India, you just sort of put us in a space where I think we need to discuss what we can look towards in the future, what we can vision and get excited about and hope for and dream for.